Okay, they've recently published the EU Water Resilience Strategy. I guess it's designed to recognise strategic importance of water, and it focuses on the ways in which increasing levels of water scarcity within the region can be mitigated. So just your thoughts, I guess, as to the timing of it, and I imagine you welcome it, but just your thoughts as to, why the EU wants to get involved in this, if you like.
Mm, yeah, no, water is a fantastic topic, Philip, and I think as a society, we've probably taken water for granted for far too long. And it's kind of interesting because as a consumer, I think we actually understand the value of water, and in particular when it gets scarce. Just think about walking through an airport and people are carrying half a liter of water, and they've paid 3, 4, 5 euros for that. Or I remember years ago I was climbing the Vesuvio just south of Naples, and it's kind of the water price goes up the higher you get on the mountain. So as consumers, we do understand that value of water, and I think this is a step by the EU and Commissioner Roswell to really recognize the value of water for the society at large as well. And let's be honest, not much would happen in society without water. We need a lot of water for human consumption. We need water for agriculture. I think water is primarily used within agriculture in certainly across the world. Water for industry is extremely important for petrochemicals, for the steel industry, for the paper industry, for the food and beverage industry, and so on and so forth. Also for generating our electricity, our energy. Water is a super resource, and even also for data centers. You see quite a few news headlines today about how much water does it cost to make a Google search. And I think all of that together kind of talks to that we probably need to take water more seriously, and therefore, indeed, as you mentioned, I welcome the water resilience strategy coming from the EU Commission.
Okay, and broadly speaking, I think the resilience strategy, it sort of recognises the importance of water in terms of competitiveness, citizen safety, and climate impact. I mean, for a lot of people, the idea of water having an impact on competitiveness might seem a little bit, and even citizen safety sounds quite dramatic. But just your thoughts, I suppose, as to whether people do understand the direct link between water and many of the our activities, whether it's in the world of work or when we're at leisure.
Yeah. No, I think you mentioned a couple of points there. Let me see if I can tackle them one by one. The competitiveness aspect. I mean, again, nothing happens without water. If you don't have your water under control, you probably have a problem in industry. Fundamentally. Now, if we turn that around, I actually think we have a massive opportunity in Europe because we are leading many of the water technology developments. We sit on, I think it's around 40% of the patents on water technology in Europe. So beyond just solving our own problems of water, the challenges around water, maybe we can also turn that into an even bigger export business for the union, and then also generate economic prosperity that way. Now, when it comes to citizen safety, I think you mentioned. Well, we're probably back to food supply as well. I mean, just having access to clean water is important. Now, water is not scarce in Europe as it is in other parts of the world, but still we see there is lack of clean drinking water in certain areas, and probably we've not been good enough at governing our water cycle over the past, I don't know, 50 or 100 years. So there are aspects there to be taken care of, that we are sure that we have not only enough water, but we also have the right quality of water, that it's not too contaminated or whatever else. I think there, for instance, I mean, desalination is used widely in many parts of the world, and it's interesting. We actually see that also coming to Europe more and more. It's been used. It was actually developed, or reverse osmosis as a process for desalination was developed in Spain and widely used there. But we see that coming to your country, the UK. We see that coming to Denmark as well, simply because irrespective of all the rain, we see that groundwater sources are slowly drying out. We've simply not been treating them well enough over the past 60 or 100 years. Let me see. I think did you mention climate as well, or the
Yeah,
climate
sorry, yeah,
climate
climate
impact?
impact. I guess that's probably the most obvious one, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And let me maybe take one specific element to that. I mean, we see that water and energy is closely linked. And in fact, 4 to 5% of the world's electricity is actually used for water. Now, water is kind of a heavy commodity, so moving water around requires a lot of energy, predominantly electricity. So there is there is a clear link there that if we can uh, preserve our water resources in a better way, if we can mitigate um, um, how should I say that? If we can recycle water, be more mindful of the way we use water, so we overall use less water, we will also use less electricity. Um, Water also often contains energy, and that sounds maybe a little bit strange, but it contains energy in terms of, for instance, hydraulic pressure. And you see that with hydropower plants and so on and so forth. But water also contains sometimes heat we can extract from it. It also sometimes contains minerals we can extract, thereby reducing energy uses in other areas of society. So altogether, if we manage our water better, we can probably also manage our energy better, and thereby reduce the total impact on the climate.
Okay, and I think the strategy suggests the combination of investment, innovation, and application of the legal framework. I guess the Water Framework Directive, maybe springs to mind, is the best way to address. I mean, is this report a tacit acknowledgement that maybe if things haven't been let to drift, more work could and should have been done, and at least this is now a sort of line in the sand beyond which these things need to happen more proactively, shall we say? Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to that.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that more investment is needed. I mean, there is a massive need to invest in water across the whole water cycle. I think sometimes, us working in the water sector, sometimes we look with envy to the energy sector, and especially the green energy sector. They've been very, very good at attracting funds over the past 20, 30, maybe even a bit longer, 20, 30 years. And we need to get more both public and private money into the water sector. And I think this water resilience strategy will probably also help to point finance institutions in this direction. There is a fundamental need, and there is a huge value in investing in water as well. Now, I'm not a legislator per se, but I think that there probably needs to be legislation in place. We need to have the right incentives, both for consumers, but probably more prominent for industry. And I think where the EU has probably done some work already is specifically about the environmental aspects of water discharge. I mean, taking care of that aspect. I think more of that probably needs to be in place. I think specifically, I mean, we need to think about how we reuse the water we have extracted or we have produced several times before we clean it, and then probably at the end of the day we'll discharge it in some form. Legislation around that is probably needed. Now, what can we do from industry as well as consumers? I think industry, we can certainly contribute when it comes to innovation. Innovation is absolutely key. Not only for individual components used in the water sector, whether that is, in my case, pumps or energy recovery devices or valves and so on and so forth, but also the way we integrate the water industry with the energy industry, as we talked about earlier. Can we talk about decentralized water plants directly connected to green energy grids and so on? Can we think about hydro storage as a way to store energy where water basically becomes the media you store? There are different creative ways that we probably need to exploit and explore to a greater extent than what we've done so far.
Okay, and I guess in terms of what can be done practically, some of the areas to focus on? I mean, water efficiency clearly is important. I mean, it's quite a broad topic, but I mean, do you have any thoughts as to, what are the main areas that would, benefit, I suppose, in the quickest time when it comes to what, should we all as consumers, be made to understand and use water more efficiently? Is it for industry and agriculture, which is obviously a big user? Just your thoughts as to where best to focus the water efficiency sort of measures.
Yeah, to be honest, I have double thoughts about us as consumers, because I think the fact is we just get more people on the face of the earth, and also in Europe, and we tend to increase our water consumption over time as well. Certainly, as middle classes rise around the world and so on, we simply we do consume more water, more mouth to feed, meaning agriculture needs more water, and so on and so forth. But there are certainly areas where we can be more efficient. I mean, if you just look at the pipelines, I mean, I think it's around 14% of the water we produce or extract, which it never reaches its destination, because there are leakages in pipes and so on and so forth. And that's probably an easy place to go to fix those pipes. In my previous employment, I was working with high-density polyethylene pipes with swathe lining, old cast iron pipes in the city of London, and reduced the water leakage there significantly. And I think that probably should be done across Europe to an even higher degree than what has been done today. This is something which has probably started 20, 25 years ago, and it's going pretty well. Leak detection, I mean, really understanding how well is your network performing, all the sensing solutions you have around really understanding and measuring your water in and your water out. I think that's something we need to continue to focus on as a society. I think where we can probably make a really, really big step change is in water reuse, using the water twice or three times or whatever. And I think there, especially in the northern part of Europe, we have taken water for granted. We take a shower and everything is more or less discharged. I think that there is technology available to be more sophisticated about how we treat wastewater, and then how can we recirculate that water into maybe not human consumption, but all kinds of other end uses, whether that is within industry, could be within agriculture. I hear people talking about, water for purpose, or even tailored water, where you are very deliberate about where do you take your water from, how do you treat your water, and then where do you use your water. I think we need to be much more sophisticated around that, and that'll probably take us the next 20 years or so on to really figure out how to do that best, because the needs of water and the sources of water are different in the different parts of Europe.
Obviously, we talked there about water efficiency. I guess certainly the word in the IT space that I also work in, AI is here and everywhere, and we've got digital transformation people talk about, and I think the water industry is very much focused on it. Well, so how much of a role does digital innovation have to play when it comes to improving or addressing water resilience? What are your thoughts there?
I think IT in general, whether that is whether we call it AI or what we call it, will help us to optimize the way we think about water. So I talked about this water reuse and the tailoring of water there. I think AI can help us to build models to formulate that water, to specify the water for different crops and so on and so forth. So I think that's kind of one aspect. The one where we work more with AI and digitalization is when it comes to energy optimization of water-related installations. I mean, if you look to something like desalination, it is quite energy intensive. You elevate the water to 60, 80 bar pressure. That costs a lot of energy. But if you can reduce the pressure by a few bar, because you have a different salinity of the water, different temperature of the water, or you know the state of the membrane you use in your process, then you can also adjust the speed of your pump and reduce your energy consumption as a specific example there. And if you enlarge that to a whole, say, water installation, a whole desal water system, including the pre-treatment, the post-treatment, and so on and so forth, there are elements there to be optimized, both in terms of energy use, but also, for instance, in terms of dosing of minerals and so on and so forth in the process.
Okay, you've mentioned desalination a couple of times, so it'd just be good to understand. I mean, as you say, traditionally it's thought of as being, of use in very, very dry parts of the world.
Mm.
But there are examples, as you say, whether in the UK or whatever, people looking at it. But I guess it's seen to be a very expensive way of producing water. Whether that changes over time or whether the mindset needs to change, that we just need to understand that we might have to pay a bit more for it, because desalination, I think 70% of the world's surface is covered by water. So to a certain extent, we're not short of water, but obviously it's got a certain characteristics that aren't very nice to drink. So just, I suppose, your thoughts as to how much of a role desalination might have in the future in areas, particularly where it's obviously not thought of as being necessary at the moment.
I think it will grow in importance in Europe. It will not, in the next 20 years, I don't see it as the predominant source of water in Europe as a whole. But we see countries like Greece, Malta, Spain, Portugal, relying a lot on desalination. We see it moving in Italy as well. And then indeed, it's kind of creeping into Northern European territories as well, because it is the most efficient unconventional water resource. I mean, if we can't extract groundwater or use and treat surface water as we've been used to, we need to look in other directions. And there, desalination is a very, very good option. Now, seen as expensive, you mentioned. I remember where we started. We started with this half-liter water costing 3, 4, 5 euros at the airport or on the mountain. If you do a right desalination installation, you actually get a cubic meter of water, so 1,000 liters, for around 1-2 euros, depending on your energy cost wherever you sit. So a lot has been done to drive down the price and the energy usage of desalination over the past 20, 30 years, and industry is still working on decreasing that even further. Now, as late as last year, when was that? October, November. The ITC Institute in Gran Canaria in Spain, they set a world record. So they built a system based on European technology, by the way, where they produced a cubic meter of desalinated water using 1.86, I believe, kilowatt hours for that cubic meter. That's not a lot, and that actually gets it down to a level where you can also integrate especially smaller decentralized desalination units with renewable energy. And then it starts to get really interesting also from a CO2 perspective and so on. Now I think where we need to be smarter, and then we're probably a little bit back to the investment part we talked about earlier. We need more money to come into water in general. And then also we need to think very, very carefully about how we procure water plants. Today, still, there is a very large emphasis on the capex cost, the initial investment in a water plant. But indeed, if you then look at a desalination plant where over a 20-year period, the vast amount of money or the majority of the money you spend is actually on the electricity. So let's make sure we take a total cost of ownership perspective, that we take that running cost into perspective when we take the decision on installing, in fact, the desalination plant that goes across the water chain. And I think also, maybe slightly off this topic, but we need to think about water infrastructure as critical infrastructure. And many of the investments we make are going to stand there for the next 20 or 25 years. So let's just make sure we take the right decisions now when we buy equipment, when we install equipment, that we're really sure that we're doing the best, not only for today's tender, but really also for running these plants in the longer term.
Okay, and I'm also interested in terms of the role of existing technologies. I mean, basically, are there all the, existing tools to help address water resilience to a reasonable level, or are we sort of sat waiting for whether it's AI, digital tools to help the process? Or I suppose what I'm saying is what can be achieved today with existing technology to address water resilience, and what more I suppose will future developments potentially bring to the party as well?
Yeah, well, I guess the good news is that we actually have most of the technologies we need to get started. We have them readily available. And we talked a little about the leakages and so on. I mean, we have leak-free or very close to leak-free pipes. There are very, very good monitoring equipment around in the market, leakage detection and so on and so forth. We have pumps. We have energy recovery devices which can harvest that hydraulic energy that is in pressurized water, for instance, from desalination or from hydropower or elsewhere. So in fact, I think we have most of what we need to get started. And we have already used those technologies vastly. We can improve, and we will, and that's also what we at Danfoss, I mean, every day we come to work to see if we can make our pieces of equipment more efficient, both as individual pieces of equipment, but also thinking about the system in which these components are integrated. So I think you phrased the question a little bit around, well, do we need to wait for AI or the digital solutions? Absolutely not. I mean, we're ready to get started. I think where AI or digital solutions can help is they can amplify for instance, energy savings by simply helping us to optimize even better than what we can do today. So let's get started. I would say we're ready. Many others are ready in the industry. So yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, again, you've referenced energy a few times. I guess it'd be good to understand when it comes to water resilience, how important it is to recognize the sort of water energy nexus or the codependency, because you need a lot of water potentially to produce certain types of energy. And as you already outlined, quite a lot of energy to move water around. So just, how those two coexist. Again, they're kind of seen as two separate industries, but there need to be more sort of collaboration, joined up thinking between those two sectors.
Yeah, I think if we can link them closer together, I think, or at least think them closer together, if you see what I mean, integrate the solutions we have across water and energy. That is done also in other parts of the world. Now, 4% of the energy use, and it's probably going to double, at least in nominal value over the next years. That's a pretty obvious one. But indeed, also water is used to produce energy. And there's been a lot of discussion around hydrogen. Hydrogen does need a lot of water, and it needs very clean, purified water for the electrolyzer stage of the production. Now, let's think about how to get access to that and make sure that we get that also in a good, clean way. So you don't spend all your wonderful hydrogen-based energy on producing the water you need for that for that process. We need to be smart around that. Now, another area where we see very good use of water, in fact, is in the gas turbines industry. Now, if you run a gas turbine and you do what is called wet compression or inlet fogging, that means spraying a little bit of high purity water in front of the turbine, you actually increase the efficiency of the gas turbine by something like 15 to 20%. So you get 15 to 20% more electricity out of the gas you burn. So there's another interdependency there where we just need to make sure water is available also for those purposes. We talked about hydropower earlier as well. And I think that there is an interesting element there about hydro storage as well. Because sometimes, and here I'm thinking specifically about these off-grid decentralized water production plants. where you use green energy, and maybe you don't need the water at the time the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. But if you then have a hydro storage facility, you can produce all the water you want when the wind is blowing, and you pump it up to a certain height. When you need the water, you take it down, and you extract the energy there. You run a turbine like you do with the standard hydropower. We need to think into those solutions as well. So maybe these were a couple of examples of how you can think about integrating water and energy a little bit more than what we've probably done so far.
Okay, and I mean, clearly it's a huge topic, and we've covered a fair amount of ground. I guess it'd be good to have your sort of final thoughts in terms of, are you optimistic or not? I mean, we've referenced various stakeholders. I mean, there are huge amounts of stakeholders,
Yeah.
agriculture, industry, consumers, all expected to play their part. I mean, how optimistic are you that all these stakeholders can be convinced to collaborate to address? Because I mean, it is. I mean, in the UK at least, I can't remember the exact stats, but by 2050, large amounts of the country are potentially going to be, dry, not enough water to go around. And I suspect many European countries is the same scenario. So it is pretty much a crisis. But again, building industry, in the UK at least, they don't like the idea. It's more expensive to put in, water saving devices apparently, so they don't do that. Just complicated, lots of stakeholders. How positive are you that they can all be made to get in the right direction?
Well, sometimes it depends on the day. I mean, I'm generally an optimist, but sometimes, I can be a little bit disillusioned, especially looking at water. But I think, I mean, let's choose to embrace this EU initiative. I think this is certainly a very, very big step in the right direction, and hopefully we can get all our ducks in a row and we can start to move forward, even if we start slowly. And this is just a strategy. Now we need to move to implementation, or even further implementation of what has been done. Now, this is a very clear sign from Commissioner Roswell from Brussels that, hey, we want industry to work together to make this happen. And with industry, I include finance institutions and so on and so forth. So I choose to be optimistic. And I think also with this, there can't be any question left about whether water is important. I mean, water is so important for our society today and also in the future, even more so in the future. So yeah, indeed, let's embrace this water resilience strategy and work together to make stuff happen.
And just perhaps finally, in terms of Danfoss, I mean, what do you view as your role within this sort of landscape? Because clearly you obviously have a lot of great technologies already. Are you busy sort of looking at future developments? Just what you can share as to how you see your role within this water resilience strategy, if you like.
No, well, I think Danfoss is fundamentally a component provider within energy efficiency solutions, and that goes across industries. And we see water as a sector where we have a role to play, both with, as I mentioned, our pumps, our high energy, high pressure pumps, our high energy efficient, high pressure pumps, energy recovery devices, valves, also VFDs or drives, frequency converters, sensing technologies, and so on and so forth. We are not the ones building the big water plants, but we do pride ourselves of a fair amount of application knowledge, so we can help our customers and industry at large to think about not only water plants in isolation, but also the interconnectivity, for instance, with the data centers, with energy sources, and so on. And indeed, also from that perspective, having this water resilience strategy, we see this as a bit of tailwind to that part of our business as well. I think the industry see that as at large as well. So we're pretty hopeful also from a business perspective that this will bring something very, very good with it. And yeah, on a personal note, it's absolutely the right thing to do for all of us citizens of the EU. And you in the UK, Philip.
No, that's great. I mean, it's been brilliant to chat to you, Michael, and thanks so much for sharing so many great insights as to, well, as I say, what is a big and fast-moving topic. But thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank